Today, all around the world, inflation is the hottest topic. Like myself, you're probably also thinking about how to get prepared and survive if the inflation gets out of hand. In this video, I will give you 11 tips for better preparation. These tips aren't mine, and they are not from some economics textbook either. These are practical tips from the people of Zimbabwe, who survived one of the worst hyperinflations in history. While doing research, I found a book titled When Money Destroys Nations by Philip Haslam. In this video, I will only summarize one of the last chapters dedicated to tips that ordinary people and businesses used to survive during hyperinflation. Before I start, please keep in mind that these tips are not financial advice, and I am not a financial advisor. Tips you will hear belong to the author and the people he interviewed for the book. I am also not trying to create fear and panic. Number 1, get out while you can. Imagine you are on a ship and the name of the ship is Titanic. You already know what is going to happen to that ship, right? If you're on the Titanic, can you tell me what part of the ship is safer and you have a better chance of survival? The answer is no place on that ship is safe. The best way to survive is to get off the ship. The country that is headed toward hyperinflation is just like Titanic headed toward the iceberg. There is no diversification strategy that can save you in a country that is facing hyperinflation, because every single investment, every single bond, every single real estate, and every single business within a country is tied to the currency, and that currency is sinking. The best way to survive hyperinflation, without a doubt, is to avoid it completely. Roughly 4 million people left Zimbabwe. Their life improved in an instant. This isn't something that can be advised for all people, but based on the responses of Zimbabweans who were interviewed by the author, it is certainly an important consideration if hyperinflation ever becomes a serious risk in your country. Immigrants tend to struggle financially and lack social support structures, but, as many Zimbabweans have highlighted, this is nothing in comparison to the hardship of living through hyperinflation. Leaving the country may also be restricted by the government. Monitoring and restricting movement at border posts would likely increase during times of acute economic crisis. The Zimbabwean government didn't have much ability to stop those fleeing, but if it could have, it probably would have. Do you have an immigration plan? Have you considered getting a second or third passport or contacting immigration specialists for advice? It isn't easy to leave family and your friends, but it is worth considering. Number 2, relationships and community. If you decided to stay, the only way you would survive hyperinflation would be through relationships and community. Zimbabweans became more dependent on one another under the pressure of food shortages and crime. If you were a loner, your chances of survival were slim. The best solution during hyperinflation is to engage with your community to barter for the goods you need. Existing social organizations have an advantage. In Zimbabwe, as the pressure on society increased, country clubs, churches, and charity clubs quickly became centers of support and trade. Access to supplies was based purely on relationships, and trust was a crucial alternative to money. During hyperinflation, as your ability to rely on money disappears, a deep and connected community around you is a key survival strategy. You would have to seek this out as a deliberate focus. Who would you be able to trust in dark times? In addition to supplying key goods, the community also offers protection. Number 3, holding foreign currencies offshore. As money becomes less useful, you would need to find alternatives. As a government prints lots of money, it would likely try as hard as possible to restrict any currency other than the state-sanctioned currency. Money has a few important uses, and one of them is the store of value. The author says, as much as you can, you should consider, during a period of very high inflation or hyperinflation, allocating a proportion of your savings offshore and denominated in stable currencies and assets. However, the problem is that almost all fiat currencies are being printed today, including the major ones, such as the dollar. Many business owners and people believe that if they hold stable foreign currency within the country, they will be safe during hyperinflation. However, the problem is that the government can easily force you to convert all your foreign currencies into local currency, which is a very common thing that most governments do during high levels of inflation, especially if you run a business and you hold foreign currencies. A few days ago, I was listening to billionaire Michael Saylor, who was explaining how he lost $900,000 overnight in Argentina in his business. He had $1 million in a bank account, and the government passed a law saying that all foreign currencies must be converted to local currency. Once conversion happened, they devalued the local currency, and the local currency lost 90% of its value against the dollar. Suddenly, the $1 million in the bank account was now only worth $100,000. He lost 90% of his money. This is why holding foreign currency within the country isn't completely safe. A better strategy is to hold it offshore, outside the country. Even though holding foreign currencies offshore is better than holding them within the country, the challenging part is deciding which foreign currency to hold. Major currencies such as the dollar and euro are being printed faster than ever before, and they are rapidly losing value. Compared to small local currencies, major currencies have a better chance of surviving once the dust settles. But still not a completely safe option if you ask me. That's why I personally prefer mainly holding gold and silver offshore besides the foreign currencies. Number 4, cash. If hyperinflation becomes an imminent risk, you would need to consider whether to take your money out of the bank. Once you have the cash in hand, you would have to try buying something that would last and could be easily traded in the near or distant future. For example, foreign currencies, gold and silver coins, fuel, or durable food. Very high bank deposit interest rates during hyperinflation create the impression that your money in the bank is growing. This is an illusion. The real purchasing power of cash in the bank falls rapidly towards zero. At this point, cash is neither a reliable unit of account nor a safe store of value. It's only a medium of exchange and therefore should only be held for very brief periods to facilitate trade. In Zimbabwe, interest rates for deposits went up to 8,000%. Those who deposited their money could multiply it 80 times in a year, but this wasn't enough. Many people, not understanding what was happening and attracted by what seemed to be exceptionally high interest rates, naively deposited their savings in the banks. They lost everything. Number 5, unit of account. Imagine every day you visit a farmer to buy 1 liter of milk. You pay, let's say, $1 and get 1 liter of milk. But one day you go to the farmer and pay the same amount of money, but he gives you only 0.9 liters of milk. When you ask, he explains that from now on, 1 liter isn't 1 liter, it is 0.9. Another day you go to him and he gives you 0.8 liters of milk and explains that the measure has changed again. In this way, the measure keeps changing every day and you keep getting different amounts of milk. How would you feel? You'd be furious, and you'd be right to feel so, because all measuring systems such as the liter and meter need to be stable. They can't be changing all the time. You can't build a house if one day 1 meter is 100 centimeters and another day it's still called a meter, but it's actually only 90 centimeters. Now I'm sure you're wondering where I'm going with these examples, so let me explain. Just like a liter or meter, money is also a measuring tool. In economics, this is called a unit of account. One of the most important functions of money is serving as a unit of account, and it needs to be stable for the economy to function properly. During hyperinflation, money loses its ability to serve as a unit of account. Just like in our milk example, every day you get a different amount of milk and people stop using it as a measuring tool. In a hyperinflationary environment, those who run businesses would need to find a way to record transactions based on a stable measurement. You need to find a yardstick of value. It must be a relatively stable benchmark for recording transactions and ideally be used by other businesses as well. In Zimbabwe, people used all kinds of yardsticks, from fuel to food, gold, and US dollars. Number 6, debt. Debts denominated in a hyperinflating currency quickly become worth next to nothing. Borrowers are usually able to pay back debts with ease, while lenders are paid back in money with a lower purchasing power than it had when they lent it. Typically, interest rates can never appropriately compensate for hyperinflation. So those who get access to loans and who can make the repayments benefit tremendously. If you borrow from people or businesses outside the banking system, you would be faced with another challenging ethical dilemma. Is it right to borrow from others, expecting they would be ruined by hyperinflation? Is it an honorable, fair trade to make? Would you borrow from a relative or friend in this way? If you need to borrow or lend during high severe inflation, then it is better to do it with stable currencies, gold, fuel, or food. Lending in stable currencies protects the lender so the borrower can borrow with a clear conscience. In Zimbabwe, this happened often with fuel and foreign currency. Number 7, manage assets, not earnings. If you run a business in a country that is facing high levels of inflation, then you will face many challenges, such as soaring input costs, price controls, restrictions on foreign currency ownership, difficulties in paying staff, dealing with failing municipal services, and coping with falling demand for products and services as people become poorer or leave the country. In such adverse operating conditions, businesses must change from a customer-oriented paradigm to a survival paradigm. Companies must focus far more on owning tangible assets and tradable goods that are durable and marketable enough to act as stores of value. A good way to do this would be to evolve from providing a particular good or service to managing assets or becoming a trader. Key considerations here include trying to anticipate the risk of the government taking the assets you hold. For this reason, as a business owner, you should closely follow how regulations change. And besides, owning assets in foreign countries that respect property rights could be a sound strategy. Number 8, pensions. Hyperinflation reduces almost all pension savings to nothing, even large amounts saved in the pension funds. Expect that your pension investments would either be reduced to nothing or nationalized. A financial advisor in Zimbabwe had this to say: "If I was advising Zimbabwean pensioners prior to the country's currency collapse, I would have said the following: cash in your pension policies. If you are on a pension, move it into something worthwhile. If you have any fixed income positions, they will reduce to nothing in hyperinflation. You need to go against all Western views of savings and storing money in cash and bonds. Convert all of your cash and savings into things that store value and into things that you will need to survive. Both government and private pensions will not save you." Number 9, medium of exchange. One of the important uses of money is that it is a medium of exchange. How would you pay for goods and services without using your national currency? There are a number of gold transaction platforms available that have some attractive transaction services. However, if the government controls the internet and payment networks, your options may become limited. Internet security may also be an issue with online payment platforms. According to the author, cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin may offer sufficiently secure, anonymous, and convenient ways to transact. These technologies are evolving quickly, and it would be important to be informed about the latest advances and innovations in these electronic currencies. Number 10, save and invest. If you took your funds out of the formal investment sector, you would still be faced with the question of where and how to save. This is a complex question that is not answered in the book, and I personally can't answer it either. However, one thing is clear, and that is going into hyperinflation with no savings in real assets is a major disadvantage. Traditionally, during times of high inflation and hyperinflation, people sought protection in things as diverse as company stocks, precious metals, property, rare collections, and trusted foreign currencies. However you choose to save, each asset should be assessed based on its proven ability to store value, how easy it would be to sell in a time of great need, how costly it is to transport, protect, and maintain, and how safe it is from government confiscation and a crashing economy. Number 11, learn how to listen. Governments use confusing language and rhetoric as powerful tools of control. You should learn how to understand statements made by the authorities. Learn what they are saying and specifically what they are not saying. Practically most things aren't too complicated for the average person to understand, despite what many governments and economists would have you think. A useful rule of thumb is this: if you don't understand what they are saying, it probably means they don't want you to understand.